Ngok and hello. You're the audience of the Village radio station. In today's familiar airtime, I'd like to invite you and your friends to enjoy the short story. It's very interesting. Named after the author's slut sister. I hope the story. It will bring moments of relaxation, interesting for you and your friends. After hearing the story, don't forget to like and leave a comment. And click subscribe channel to support Ngok An, as well as the production team of the channel. Where is Mrs. Lin? Water Village, come and see this. The village called the neighborhood like this. Mrs. Lin soon got used to it, and the whole village got used to it. The reason I became Ray is because of Mrs. Lin. She's been late for 15 years. Since my husband died, Mrs. Lin also never let herself lack of affection. From the neighbor to the car mechanic at the end of the alley. From single to family. A man who is Mrs. Lin dare not play with. The land whimper from the village above the neighborhood below. Mrs. Lin was unharmed. People often say, "I don't care. Others will be afraid." People are drawn to. I swear to her, keep the door shut in the house. The next day on the road normally. At first the villagers were afraid. It's 15 now. People are bored and not sad anymore. The woman who died when her husband died. Ms. Lin is almost 40 years old and said that she is not young, but old is not old. Lin's husband is famous for being violent, lazy, eating greed, co-working with children in the home. A wise woman takes care of everything. People think they love you too. When her husband was alive, she worked hard and had no time to rest. It was a light match for 3 days. 5 days a heavy battle he kept fighting all the time. Especially when alcohol comes in. It's a good fight too. Lin is also a beautiful girl of the village. It's not a form of water. Willow how ho jealous. But he's also the salty type. The face of the oval bears a gentle grace. The body doesn't have to talk. Come around, the skin is white and thin. Count. Mrs. Lin is even more not a resourceful person. Up to the living room, down to the kitchen. The room thing. The more it is not discussed. Your husband treats you like an animal. The villagers love life. The daughter chooses to gamble with both lead and fish. Even so, no one dares to meddle in the affairs of other people's homes. The old village is the same. If anything, people whisper. But there are some who stand out to help solve it. Bring the sound of barking back into the line. In this rural place, people are most afraid of being rumored. There's a lot of thinking. Who doesn't want to be friendly? Mrs. Lin's husband lost the whole village was also happy for her. Because in the end, also escaped the barrage of innocent ROI. People are also happy. Because Mrs. Lin, after months of suffering, it's like seeing life. To see the light, people are also happy. People put it in their stomachs and don't dare say it. At the funeral, Mrs. Lin's face was normal. Not shed a tear from the beginning to the end. I don't cry. It's like a caring machine for your husband. There is no feeling. People understand too. AI can get a little emotional with the day-to-day man. Humble yourself like that. Stay up to this moment. The meaning of the word means the end. Lin has a husband who has lost 2 sons. The older son is away on business. On the day of the funeral, his father returned. The work is not done until now. He only comes home once a year. The boy was under the influence of his evil father. It also breeds psychological violence. I don't know how the story ends. I only know that it hit people's homes so badly. Arrested by the police. Where it goes, Mrs. Lin doesn't know. Try out Rhea. In the house all year round, there is only Lin. Out hanging around poor lonely. The first time her husband died, neighbors around sometimes. Run to visit again. It also helps her feel sad. That's why 100 days of marriage is over. Mrs. Lin has gone public, back and forth with another man. I saw her in the hand with him that day, selling coal right behind her house. The whole village was surprised. Since then, two people walking around openly as a couple. Mrs. Lin is also completely. It's not like being with a husband. Too late. She's completely rid of the image of being resourceful, completely turned into a spinning woman. In the pleasures of love, day by day the pair of boys and girls. Oh my God, I can see Lin Ray Field again today. Not at home with men. She was not satisfied to see Mrs. Lin. He slapped me in the face. She was actually close before. I love Lin very much. It's just because she saw Lin degenerate too quickly. I can't talk, so I'm so jealous. But say how much. From gentle to join others cursing detractors. But Mrs. Lin remained indifferent, not changed. It made her extremely depressed. Let's just see Mrs. Lin. It is her mother who is not comfortable. Mrs. Lin, the point of mouth immediately ties that person. You hear that, so you're kind of indifferent. I know there are lice in the blanket. People in the room understand each other's difficulties. As you mean her dead husband. He's got a big, healthy body. Physiology is boring. The two of you are forever trying to push out the guy. If it's not related to the third and fourth sides, let's put pressure together. There's probably no one right now. After you two were born, you were almost exhausted. Hard days like ghosts with bottles of wine. Plus more. He was fired from the factory. The economy in the house has suddenly collapsed. He became more and more dependent on alcohol, one-handed farm work. Mrs. Lin must dare Ao to manage all the way, grow 3 beds of vegetables, with a bunch of potato chips. I know when to get better. I have to raise you. Not just raising kids, but also to raise a drunken husband, working hard all day long, to rest in the evening. She also wanted to be comforted by her husband, but the husband was busy all night with drunk men. So Mrs. Lin is mostly suffering. Single pillow blanket PCs. With a woman who was that age. The spring scene is still drying. Such a lack of affection. How can I stand it? In that dark time, he always sold coal behind the house appeared. Like a ray of light in the life of Mrs. Lin. Show is like that. At that time, Mrs. Lin took on more work pulling coal cars. To sell to enlist more copper ray, let you be less in need. And to take care of sending the big guy to the city for college. Since then, he has been with Mrs. Opportunity to interact with each other. He was always initially compassionate due to miserable feelings. The wretchedness of the woman. Married as well as not. So often vinegar for Mrs. Lin. A little cake and a little gift. Mrs. Lin saw that he was always in a good mood. Every time Grandma swears is his face out red gay up, the pounding breath in my chest. The woman's subtlety made Mrs. Lin realize. He always noticed that Mrs. Lin noticed him. Both of them are on the outside, and I don't want to say anything. I'm still trying to remember her husband. The turning point just happened. When two people rolled together on a drunken night. How long has Mrs. Lin been satisfied with her desire? Like the sun after the rain. He is out with you outside. It's like a salvation. Since then the two have been married. Not only sentimental cake gift bag. You always give Mrs. Lin money. The pair together just got love and money. Spirit seems to demand fulfillment. The least you can do is those two things. Now that we have both, what else do we need? But from there she was beaten more by him. You talk to him all the time. The needle in the bag has to come out for a long time. She slept with him several times. You also know the story. But the strange thing is, you mean you can't fight and make noise as Mrs. Lin thought. He condoned her adultery. They only seem to care about alcohol. There seems to be only wine. Even if Mrs. Lin brings her son home, then he's fine. But it's not that light. Since the explosion, when I was drunk, you dragged Lin Ray to fight. At the time, he just silently picked up Lin Ray and hit her. Not a word. Mrs. Lin also quietly endured. He beat, tired, and rested. To the night, she go looking for a lover to send her confessions, and comforted by people. Just like that. Let's get through the day. So, the neighbors saw poor Mrs. Lin. Real. She saw her husband and wife, they were just eating, to take revenge on each other forever. Until someone leaves. Then this false story is over. Is it too late? Mrs. Lin finally finished digging the field. The sweat on me was like a wet shower dress. Get it stuck to your back so you can test Ray, accidentally showing off her sexy curves. The woman is now almost 50 years old, but still beautiful, salty and iron lipstick. My face is still full. As blessed as the green spring girl. Is there? Just a few more traces of time, but very dim and few. The body is still around. How many years has it been? You can go back and forth from person to person. These people range from young to old. They're all dead tired. The woman. I'm going to leave. Then, where did a man her age come from? If you have some water, please give it to me. Mrs. Lin raised her head and looked. Rub a man who's probably over 5 weeks old. The gentle and benevolent countenance of piety. Mrs. Lin is just like that. People don't answer. Just staring like, I want to eat people alive. Son is seen like that. Be patient and let her see. He even bent down. A little to make her look good. Honestly, you've been paying close attention to this woman ever since. From the moment he took the hoe out to the field. Is that she takes care and works tirelessly. The figure looks small. The law that comes out is very powerful. The 2 hands planted each. Trees in long and beautiful rows. I don't know if my wife is that smart. Son thought of the scene. My wife's sweat has also been choking for 15 years. Look at that hard-working woman. I think someone is home now. The farmer's wife also likes to plow. That woman in the field over there. From the time I came to the field, I don't seem to notice anything but the trees. After a while you sweat. To get her clothes on. The seductive curves on body half hidden, half present. More attention-grabbing. Son said that. Any man who sees this. If you are not attracted, you can only. Not a real man. That moment bent down on the earth. Kia's ass kept fluttering like a tease. I don't know if it's due to fatigue, or there's some kind of feeling. Son saw his throat dry. Take a risk and get used to it by asking for water. You forgot the real water. Where did you come from? I've been working here. I haven't seen you. Mrs. Lin suddenly asked. He made a fool of himself and then laughed. I came out of the potato hole in the field over there. She was so absorbed that she couldn't see me. I saw you when you were here. It's in my land's field. That's Mr. Deem's daughter-in-law. So you're not from this village, are you? I'm your biological father, Lan. She had just given birth and her husband was away on business. So I'm here to help him. The field work is also playing with me. I'm from the village over there. Turns out he's from the village. You get the same good. A girl is beautiful to her father. You keep complimenting me, that's clear. Can you give me some water? Do it all day. I forgot to bring water. It's almost done. Going home to get water takes time. So come here. Take a sip. Then finish it. Okay, here you go. So grandmother, your family doesn't let you take care of your daughter. Mrs. Lin poured water and asked. My house has been gone for almost 15 years. You look younger than me. I am 48 this year and you. I was 2 years spring. Yes, I am a few years behind you. But the house is no different. My husband has been dead for over 15 years, so your house is good. No one at home can help you. Two people naturally sat down on the field to talk to each other. The first time we met, I don't know about the similarity of circumstances, or maybe they both noticed each other. You two talk very openly, as if you've known them for a long time, not for the first time. When it comes to heart, I also have two sons. He's been away on business all year, and he only came back once. Watch me die. Other times it's great not to see the shadow. Two guys are boring. He fights people. I was arrested and sent to prison and never came back. She said for a moment that Mrs. Lynn stopped thinking, and then he seemed to get back to talking again. Stop talking about your house. It's boring. I see your girl Lan is very smart, loved by her husband's house. You must be very happy. I can get you guys. My house is good for 3 kids. On the Lan is a boy. There's another girl under it. Thief Via, you're all good at stable jobs. I'm afraid of my husband. I'm alone now. These days the Lan is born. I just came here to help him with that. Then you are the best. You are so blessed like me. They have the voice of 2 boys. It's not thanks to anyone. You just have to work hard. God doesn't care about you. Maybe for a while. To find a kind man to lean on. From now until the end of my life. I just hope so. But if you miss a trip, Ra is thinking too much. But the number of you, it is also so crazy. How many people look back and forth? No one's going anywhere. When will the number you know be asked? You are so charming. I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm as sharp as this. Who doesn't like you? It's just that you like a wadey. Mrs. Lynn was praised and turned out a refreshing smile. When she laughed, 2 dimples gracefully blessed a strange. Mr. Sun kept looking at that smile as if hypnotized. The field blows to a noonday wind. Shark blowing through. A scene between 2 lonely people. Suddenly strangely peaceful. Are you lonely like this? Have you noticed anyone? I look at you as healthy as this. That I heard. The men in the village are also handsome. Without being seen. Now that I see you, the rumors are true. You can praise her. I'm so old. Fortunately, they also have health. I should come to you from time to time. Back to business. It's not like you're still so young and so charming. Yes, it's not. Everywhere you go, people praise you for being beautiful. God for a healthy white skin. I also hope that some kind people will come to me. It is not a waste of the body. I have been forgotten by time. The 2 suddenly laughed. After the joke that just messed up. This is from Mrs. Lynn. The painting continued. I see you're being picky. There are not many people chasing you. Choose a man who will take care of you soon. Already at this age. I can't choose, Uncle. I just have to find tomorrow. To harmonize the whole sex thing. Like the ones you. If you have a couple of meals, it's boring. You can't. My need for that is high. But it doesn't fit. You 2 laughed again. In the middle of the field with every wind blowing. That talk endlessly out. 2 people we met for the first time. There's a strange synchrony. They tell each other all sorts of things. From heaven to earth. There's no taboo or reticence. In a conversation that's kind of carefree. It's a personal exploration of each person's words. Mrs. Lynn saw a man her age, but handsome and healthy. It's also fun and exciting. This man I just met. Give Mrs. Lynn a strange vibration emotions. Different from the men. I've been to Mrs. Lynn's life. These are rude men. It can't be compared to elegant sophistication. That's interesting of Mr. Sun. So Mrs. Lin Yin. I agree with you, Zen, after talking to you. I also get along with her in a strange way. I didn't expect to be with my daughter. To meet a woman like this. Mrs. Lin is not only good at farming, but also talk very gracefully. People are also beautiful. It's just that it's a bit liberal. But he seemed to have a good impression of this woman. How long will you be here with your daughter? When I was bored, Mrs. Lin remembered asking Mr. Sun. Maybe half a month from now. During that time I was here. Come home and play with me. Your house is alone like that. Do you mind if I come to play? No, uncle. There is one in my house, but I don't mind. I'm bored being alone. Come play with me, make it fun. I see you and I get along. That's a good talk, isn't it? I came to talk to you. During this time for fun, I can do whatever you want. I also have good wine, and I am ready. You came to my house. But we've only known each other for hours like this. Do that if you're neighbor. When we whisper, we do it. Oh my God, this uncle. Not afraid. People like a lot of things like that. My 4 neighbors are all VIN, not bad AI. People don't care if you come. All right. I'll come to your house someday. And now I'm done. It's not a little late. It's a new day. Yes, it was fun talking to you. Make me forget all the time. I remember coming to your house. I remember. Sun went back to work that day, not in a mood to rejoice. Look at the way you pick up. But the smile still hangs on the corner. Makes Lan suspicious. What did my father do today? You seem to love life like that. Dad. She jumped out and hit Mr. Sun's back. Mr. Sun turned back. I saw my daughter. Breathed a sigh of relief. This girl is a soulful father. Are you going out to catch the wind? You have to know how to take care of yourself. I'm going to suffocate at home. Come out here for a bit, Dad. Flush your mouth. It's for me, not for me. You're not doing it for me. You're acting like I'm forcing you. When I saw that my father looked hot, Lan hugged him and laughed. Yeah, I know you love girls. So what's so funny about you today? It's nothing. San replied with a pause. Go back to Lan. Do you know Mrs. Lin in this village? Who the hell doesn't know about her? Even the neighboring villages know. I only came back from the forest, so I don't know. You're making fun of me. Why did you suddenly ask her? Where did you hear the break? I asked. Why did you have such a bad attitude towards her? Oh my God, my dad. I don't know. She's been dubbed. That's the old lake in the village. Oh yeah, what do you say? Since her husband died, she's never lacked a man's shadow. Sometimes there are rumors of a third party. People's wives come to the house. I swear to you, Mom. Sun sounds heavy. How much sympathy accumulated? In our lunch conversation. Just fly clean. Who could have expected? A woman like that. Famous again. In this infamous way. I think I lost all interest. But you agreed to come over and play with her. What to do now? Did you hear what your father said? I heard you. Dad, it's weird today. I met her in the field. I didn't say I heard the breaks. You don't have to hate me. I'd better not see her. If you miss a meeting, there is absolutely no feeling or some kind of relationship. I don't want you to be this old, but they're fooled by people. Laying eggs smarter than ducks. I know what I should do. Mrs. Lin returned these days. Day and night, thinking about Mr. What kind of man is so attractive, I don't know. Speaking politely is easy to hear. The voice is soft and warm. But the most special thing that Mrs. Lin noticed, that's a pretty big part of Mr. Sun. I heard that men have a little big, high physiology. Think about it. Mrs. Lin is burning up all over again. After all, she's a highly physiological person. You've been a carpenter for months. I just got used to it for 2 months. What man, Mommy? People are all sweaty. It was covered in wood dust. It's also weak on the bed. You don't like it at all. The water has a vestibule. From the day I met Mr. Sun, Mrs. Lin kept low and uneasy. Just look in. Looks. A figure of a man comes to his door. I waited for a few days and the guests didn't come. It makes Mrs. Lin even more uneasy. Maybe I hear something that should be boring to you or something. He's your father, Lan, anyway. The Lan doesn't say anything. So he's lost interest. Or what he's busy with. Or she's actively going over there to see Sao. Why not think of it early? Think about doing. Mrs. Lin ran in to change into a decent clothes, then close the door and go to the Lan house. Purpose. I want to see if Sun is home or not. The day before, she was dressed a little too casually. I chose clothes more carefully today. It is also for the Sun to see. The distance from her house to Lan house is not far, but every step she took was like walking on a fire, nervous forever. Came to Mrs. Lan's door and she peeked inside. It's like stealing. It's a shame you didn't find the one you wanted. Maybe Mr. Sun has returned to the village. I told you to stay for half a month. Sun sits on the lake in the corner. She looked at her 7-year-old with a soft face, but I can't help but feel the same way. You saw it when she came, but I didn't dare to meet. I'm afraid the Lan in the house is not good. Moreover, you are still watching the Kia story. That's what the Lan said. But the last few days, he also never stopped thinking about Mrs. You remember every word. To her liberality and naturalness. He remembered her sincere and benevolent smile. And his heart is also hangover. When I saw you today, Mrs. Lin is very beautiful today. But maybe this is her usual appearance. The day before work. It should be a bit of a loose haircut. But today, she's wearing a silk dress. Every step makes someone else move. And a little light makeup. They look even more attractive. There's something inside you that's so hilarious. Look at that woman sad. You feel like a traitor. Or I'll just hide her Lan over there and play. It was promised anyway. Returned yesterday. Mrs. Lin no longer held the mood of longing, waiting as before. She returned with comfortable clothes, at home eating chicken together. At that time, Mr. Take a shower, choose a decent outfit, brush a little, and then he'd come to his old friend's house in this village. Go to Mrs. Lin's house to play. I groped for a while. I finally heard a familiar sound. I looked over and saw that Mrs. Lin was calling the feed the chickens. What did that woman do? Is not paying attention to the surroundings. And of course I didn't realize you were coming. Mr. Sun honked his voice. Miss Lin, I'm coming over to play. I don't know if the boss is welcome. Is this a sudden guest? Mrs. Lin is listening to Mr. Sun's voice. I thought I heard wrong. Raise your head, thinking you're looking the wrong way. It takes a few seconds. I was ready to run out again. Oh, are you there? I thought you forgot about me. I've been waiting for you for the last few days. Mrs. Lin hurriedly opened the door for Mr. Sun to come in. To see you. Mrs. Lin's moodiness the past few days seems to vanish clean. She was just attentive and because of talking to Mr. Sun, forgetting everything. I see your face getting red. The eyes keep looking somewhere. Mrs. Lin remembered. I'm wearing a t-shirt with holes in my flesh. She hastily grabbed the collar and died. I'm home alone. You should dress like this. Make it comfortable. Don't judge me. Wearing those clothes, it's annoying. You don't have to pay attention to me. Just wear whatever is comfortable. But men like it when we see it. Mr. Sun laughed softly, half joking, half teasing Mrs. Lin. I'm just afraid of you criticizing me. I don't mind being alone at home. I was so happy to see you, I forgot. I feel for you. I don't know. You're welcome in this countryside. To find a modern-minded Aya like you, it's also rare. Sun entered the house. Mrs. Lin changed her clothes and returned to Ray. "You two just like that. It's comfortable to talk to each other." Mrs. Lin told Mr. Sun most of the stories, even the stories of her lovers. Two people just met. We done to talk about things like that to each other. Two people are carefree and open to each other. Listening to Mrs. Lin talk, Mr. Sun nodded. Maybe they will sincerely respond. Surprisingly, the two of you just talked. There was a day when we got together. From the point of view of life to the grace of words, it's like being born for each other. At first there was a little bit of two. After that, there is no distance. They make silly jokes and they don't care. They were both drunk talking together. Make Mrs. Lin even habitually. That pulls the skirt up to the knee. And I'm not afraid. For a moment, time passed into the evening. Oh, I never thought I'd see you again. Someone who talks to me like you do. You are so cute and beautiful. Who doesn't like it? Don't talk about an ordinary man like me. We are in the same situation. Should be. Maybe it's easier to understand each other's thoughts. You keep complimenting me. I'll be honest with you, I've never to sit and talk to a man. It's been this long. I also find it fun to talk to you. If you don't mind my time here, I'll come and bother you often. Oh, how can I blame you? If you don't mind me, come here and play with me. I'm glad it's not over. I love you too, but you really love me. So what do you do? Uncle, I want to be honest. I've thought about this too. I want to tell you what you mean. Yes, I'm listening. I mean like this. While I'm here with my daughter, come over to my house to play. Then we got to know each other. If they fit together in lifestyle and perspective, then we're back together. You and I already know each other as situation. And more than that, we all love each other. This age. But also find the right person to rely on. What is equal to? Is that right, Uncle? How do you see what I mean? Mr. Sun listened to Mrs. Lin and his face cracked. You really didn't expect it. This woman is so bold and so frank. They've only met a couple of times. That she would have dared to bring up such a thing. He was confused. I think this is going to take time. I'll stay here for a few days and play with you. It's about getting to know us slowly, not in a hurry. Yes, come here and be friends with me. Then we slowly get to know you. You're acting like I cheated on her house. I know. You are also in a hurry. We've only met a few times. That's my nature, Uncle. I like to say out now. Or is it lost? So I'm asking this. Gas isn't. You women are so old. Are you still interested in the marriage? He looked at me like this and said I wasn't interested. I'd rather go to the temple. I'm just afraid of men. But we women still fight well. You two laugh, oh, through jokes and stories of girls. Mr. Sun also understood some of Mrs. Lin's people. But you don't take it personally. You're even attracted because of the beauty along with the directness of Mrs. Lin. The same lonely person for a long time. You also understand the secrets of the secret. With Mrs. Lin's difficulty to make up people who milk conscience and money. It started to get dark. Mr. Sun asked permission to leave. It's too late. I'm going to help my daughter with some work. Or he's looking forward to asking, oh, why are you back? I'm here to eat with you and you're still serving me. Mrs. Lin saw Mr. Sun standing up to demand his return. The hands and feet are all up. How does your family want to help me? Mr. Sun laughed at Mrs. Lin's embarrassed look. Whatever you want, most of you can. The whole thing. As long as you want. All right, I know your heart. But I have to go home today. Next time I tell her my house, I'll come to dinner with you. Don't worry. I promise, if you don't come, I will be angry. It's okay. Don't worry. Sun Ra is back. 2 days later, he made an excuse to eat at a friend's house. to find Mrs. Lin, this time too. Mrs. Lin is grilling a chicken. A hearty plate of rice has been laid out. Mrs. Lin also brought a bottle of precious glutinous wine. Let Sun aim the wine. Mr. Sun held the wine bottle up his nose to smell it. She turned to Mrs. Lin again. Would you drink with me? Yes, if you want. I can do it right away. I mean, you're a bit of a bad drinker too. Two people drinking and talking. The feeling of eating a family meal. It made Mrs. Lin very happy. She was happy to talk to Mr. Sun. In a very intimate way. She gave him the best piece of chicken. Warm feelings have not been enjoyed for a long time. Made Mrs. Lin very emotional. Her eyes and her gestures for Mr. Sun. Extremely intimate. The water is like this. Make the two of them. They look like a real old couple. Drink a few cups. Mrs. Lin's face kept turning pink. It's like 18 to 10 girls. The alcohol makes the two AI bodies hot. Mrs. Lin gave her hand slightly loosened the collar. To make the spring scene appear. Sun saw that. I'm no longer interested in chicken. I thought you drank too much to be tired. Mrs. Lin asked him to lie down and rest for a while. And in the meantime, you're done tidying up your plate. Then he sat down next to Mr. Sun. Meet you. It was the biggest surprise of my life. Mr. Sun kept looking at Mrs. Lin. Mrs. Lin let him look like that. Your feet are still standing. It's like being very comfortable. Then we met like fate that I didn't see. You and I are so charming. That's very charming. After sitting like that for a while, Mr. Sun stood up. The cow pretended to leave. But Mrs. Lin held her hand tightly and pulled it back. Uncle, you can't go back now. When you come back, I am angry. It's late and there's a bit of yeast in you. Fear is behaving rudely. Just let me come back the other day. No, I definitely won't let you go. Come in here with me. As I said, Mrs. Lin dragged Mr. Sun into the room. She threw the blanket on the ground. Then he put Sun to bed. Mr. Sun is happy in his stomach. But keep it hidden. This doesn't seem right. I can't take it anymore. Let's move on. You also said learn slowly. This account must also be checked. Mrs. Lin took the initiative to take off her clothes. Give it to Mr. Sun for enjoyment. Smooth white flesh. With Mrs. Lin's passionate expression. Let Mr. Sun lie down. You can also enjoy all of Mrs. Under her guidance. You don't have to do anything to be happy. But letting Mrs. Lin take the initiative forever is not good. Sun quickly grasped the situation, working with Mrs. Lin, but still actively yield so that the two can balance. As in the conversation, you two are so compatible. The pillow. They were both together until 9 p.m. Mr. Sun hugged Mrs. Lin and asked, how can an old man like me make you lose interest? You look without knowing it. I'm still very interested. You are so handsome and still healthy. How can I live when you come back now? Just act like I've lost contact. Have come to this step. It's like this, and you're afraid of me running away. So you two go back and forth. Mr. Sun came to Mrs. Lin's house more often. I raced there almost every night. And then it broke. The village on the bottom huddled into the derision. But you're both deaf-eyed. Mr. Sun even picked up Mrs. Lin at the house in the village over there. Mrs. Lin has been looking after the house with Mr. Sun since. It's like fish meeting water. Both of you can eat together and work together. Stay with Mr. Sun. Mrs. Lin also seems to satisfy the beast. My love for you. Mr. Sun has abundant energy. Completely meet the needs of Mrs. Lin. You have no mind. But with another man. Alian also came several times to advise me to leave Mrs. Lin. That he wouldn't. To give up again. He even came out to protect Mrs. Lin. Lan advised not to. I also want you two to be together. The months just went by, the lives of Mr. Sun and Mrs. Lin. And just like that, it's gone. Mrs. Lin has fixed the moonbee butterfly. Take care of your husband. Even my husband's children. She also takes care of it. After a while of rejection, the land is also for Mrs. Lin. My husband helped me to go to work. Mrs. Lin is agile and resourceful. You have experience raising children. It helped the land a lot. Sun has always believed in honesty. With Mrs. Lin's kind mind, it's not wrong. Once, Lan's son almost drowned. Fortunately, she was rescued in time. So the land tree accepted her unconditionally. And also from there, the villagers began to look at her with different eyes. The image of Mrs. Lin is a gentle wife. The woman who loved you is back. A few years later, people don't remember Mrs. How she used to be a promiscuous woman. I know there is a couple in the village getting married too late in old age. Living together is very happy. So people still say, try to live well. God will not be pleased. This is the end of our short story. After hearing what you'd like to share, subscribe to the channel to support the Story Channel team. Hello, and see you later.